Hola a todos y buenos días. Hoy vamos a seguir aprendiendo sobre la hora. Today we're going to start talking about time, la hora. In your book, this is in the preliminary lessons. This is the section where we're talking about numbers. And in this specific part of numbers, we're going to learn the phrase ¿Qué hora es? What time is it? And we're going to get to practice figuring out how to read a clock and understand what time it is in Spanish. I was a little unsure about how to teach this lesson because it requires me to write on the whiteboard. And so I'm going to try and simulate this whiteboard on a Google document that you see on the screen. I really would like your feedback on if this works as good as how I would normally teach it in class. Let's go ahead and get started. So if you're in my class and you're taking notes, again, this is the preliminary section. We're still learning about numbers, and this section is called ¿Qué hora es? So I'm going to teach you the 5 steps, really 4 steps, in being able to read a clock in Spanish, okay? So we're going to start right here with step number 1. I'm going to move this and zoom in so that this is nice and clear for everyone. All right, so la primera cosa que vas a hacer, the very first thing you're going to do is you have to choose between the phrases es la and son las. Now, if you are new to Spanish, these 2 phrases may not mean anything to you, but if you've had some experience with Spanish, you may be able to notice the difference between these 2 statements immediately. So looking at the difference between es and son, the difference between la and las, and the difference between these entire phrases, if you haven't been able to figure it out, what we will notice is that this first statement is singular. Both s is conjugated for a third person, one person, and la is a singular thing as well. When we look at son las, this phrase is plural. So we're going to choose either es la or son las based on our hour. We're choosing it based on the hour because this is ¿Qué hora es? Not ¿Qué tiempo es? We learned in our earlier Spanish classes that tiempo in many places means weather. And when we ask about the time, we're asking about la hora instead. So I would ask ¿Qué hora es? We will look at our clock and we would need to know if we're going to choose es la or son las. Let's go ahead and practice that. So if I had a time that was 10 and I asked you ¿Qué hora es? You would look at this time and you would try and figure out, is this hour singular or is this hour plural? What hours of the day are a singular hour? For some reason, this is a very tricky question. So the singular hour is only 1. So there is only 2 hours throughout the entire day when you're going to need to say the phrase es la when someone asks you what time it is. The rest of our hours are plural. If there are 2 hours through 12 hours, that is more than 1 hour, and we're going to choose son las the majority of the time. So if you can't remember both, I will stick with son las and let people correct you, but I know that all of you all will practice this enough to be very good with reading your clocks and telling time. So if someone asked you ¿Qué hora es? And your clock was reading 1, then we're going to choose es la. So step 1, you look at your clock and you have to determine, am I going to answer with es la or son las? If I ask ¿Qué hora es? Here, it's son las 10. ¿Qué hora es? Here, es la 1. Our second step in reading the clock is we have to read the hour now. And we've already went ahead and to say that es la 1 or son las 10. This is going to be the part of your time that is before the colon, if you're reading a digital clock like this one, or it's going to be the time that your shorthand on an analog clock is pointing to. So again, the way we practice this is we looked at our time. If we're looking at this one, and I asked you, ¿Qué hora es? What time is it? Your answer will be son las 6. If we're looking here, before we can read the whole time and we can only read the hour, and I asked you, ¿Qué hora es? We would see son las 4. Step 3 is we have to go ahead and read the colon. The colon is going to be pronounced the same as the word and that we learned in our numbers video. So we have some times with minutes attached to them. Let's continue with 10. Maybe it's 10:20. And for 1, maybe it's 1:25. If you're having trouble reading numbers, you need to go back to some previous videos and previous notes to make sure you can count from 1 to 60. Everything you need is here on this channel. So, when we're looking at how to tell time, we start with our step 1. We're going to choose es-la or son las. We're looking here, it's 10, so that's son las. We're going to say son las 10. This colon reads as and, so it's e. And then the fourth step is to read the minute. 20. ¿Qué hora es? Son las 10:20. ¿Qué hora es? Es la 1:25. So, when we read our minute, if it wasn't clear enough, we're talking about, again, the part right after the colon, or we're talking about the part of the clock where our long hand is pointing to. And if you can't tell time, in order to get these numbers, you're going to have to multiply by 5. So there is one more part. I'm not sure what happened. Here it is here. If we look at these times here, we should all be able to read them at the end of this video. Let's try it. ¿Qué hora es? For this one, I would say es la 1:45. ¿Qué hora es? Son las 2:22. ¿Qué hora es? Son las 4:55. Try these 3 on your own. I'm looking forward to see how well you do with this. Tune in for the second video. We're going to get a chance to talk about some important times that break our pattern. These are very important as well. Until then, adios.